Okay, so the 2 points that I'm going to use is 3, 4, and then I'm going to use -2 and -2. Okay, and so your directions would say, find the equation of the line that goes through these 2 points. And I'll read you exactly what it's going to say. Yeah, write a slope-intercept equation for a line with the given characteristics, and the line passes through these 2 points. Okay, so our goal is to get it to y equals mx plus b form. That's our goal. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find the slope. Okay, we're going to find the slope of both of these points, or the slope of these 2 points. I'm going to start with this point right here. Okay, so I have -2 minus 4 over -2 minus 3. Okay, so if you see, I started with the number 2, or the number -2 on the top. So because I started with that point for my y values, I have to start with that point for my x values. So this has to be first, and this has to be first on the bottom. Okay, I can't switch back and forth. -2 minus 4 is -6. -2 minus 3 is -5. Okay, so I have found the slope of that line. Okay, now my second step, question?
Oh, it becomes positive?
Because it's a negative over a negative, yes. Okay, now the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to plug my slope and either point into point slope form. Okay, and point slope form is y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Okay, that's what it is right now. So we have our slope, which is 6 over 5, and I'm going to use this point right here. Doesn't matter which point I use, I'm going to use this one because they're both positive. That's really the only reason, but I could use either one. So then I'm going to have y minus 4 equals 6 over 5 x minus 3. Okay. And my third step is to simplify to y equals mx plus b. Okay. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to distribute my slope. So I'm going to have y minus 4 equals 6/5 x. Then I am multiplying 6 over 5 times -3 over 1. That's what I'm multiplying there. 6 over 5 times -3 over 1. 6 times -3 is -18. 5 times +1 is 5. Okay? So I have distributed 6 over 5 to -3 over 1. That's how I got that. And I'd already distributed it to the x. Okay. Now what would I have to do is I have to get this 4. I have to add the 4 to both sides. And I'm going to have to erase some in order to get us to that point because we're going to have to do some addition. So I've got y equals 6 over 5. Yep, I've run out of room. Okay. So I'm going to erase up here. And I'm going to simplify. So I've got y minus 4 equals 6 over 5 x minus 3 over 1. And I guess I didn't need to go that far back. Y minus 4 equals 6/5 x minus 18 over 1. Or 18 over 5, I'm sorry. Okay, so I got all that written down now. Now I am adding 4 to both sides. Okay, so I have y equals 6/5 x. Now, this is what I'm going to do down here. I've got negative 18 over 5 plus 4. So that is negative 18 over 5 plus 4 over 1. And I would encourage you to do that in a different spot on your paper. I would move it completely over so that you can deal with these fractions. Now, I've got to get a common denominator. What is my common denominator?
5.
Good. 1 goes into 5 times. 5 times 4 is?
20.
Good. Are you with me? Okay. So 4 over 1 and 20 over 5 is the same thing. That's how I got that. Now I've got negative 18 over 5 plus 20 over 5. Okay, my positive number is the larger absolute value. The signs are different, so that means I subtract.
You didn't cross multiply, did you?
I did not cross multiply. Cross multiplying.
So how would you get 20 again?
Okay, so the reason that I got 20, my common denominator was 5. So I have a 5 here and I have a 1 here. Okay, so I have to have a common denominator. So 5 is my common denominator. So what I asked myself was, how many times does 1 go into 5? And how many times?
Right.
Good. So then I have to take the 4 and I have to multiply it times 5.
Okay.
That's how I got the 20.
Okay.
Okay? And so sometimes it's those fractions that give us as much trouble as anything else. Okay? What'd you say?
The fractions were getting to me.
Mm-hmm. The fractions definitely do. And so this then is my final answer. Y equals 6/5 x plus 2 over 5. Now, do we want to do another one of those? Would that be helpful? One more? Okay. Let's do it. Can I go off this screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, the 2 points I'm dealing with now are negative 2, 3, and 4, negative 1. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to find your slope. Okay, so I'm going to give you a 30-second head start. You find your slope between negative 2, 3, and 4, negative 1. Okay, did you get negative 4 over positive 6? Good, and that simplifies to?
2 over 3.
Good, and don't forget your negative. Caitlin, did you get that too?
Oh, yeah, I got that.
Good, 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 good. Okay, so now we're going to do y minus y sub 1 equals my slope times x minus x sub 1. Okay. And we could use either point. It actually doesn't matter which point we use. And I don't really think any of them are better or worse. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this one. So I have y minus 3 equals negative 2/3 x minus negative 2. What happens to that minus negative 2?
Comes back.
Good. So I have y minus 3 equals negative 2/3 x plus 2. Okay. So now we're going to distribute our negative 2/3. Okay. Now here, and we'll do it in a different color just so we can see it. This is negative 2/3 times 2 over 1. Negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4. 3 times positive 1 is positive 3. Okay? Are we okay there? Okay. Now I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Okay, so now I have y equals negative 2/3 x. Okay, and I'm going to do this part right here on the right. Okay, and I'm going to do it in green. I have negative 4/3 plus 3 over 1. Because anything that doesn't have a denominator, we write it over 1. Okay, so now I've got negative 4/3. I need to rewrite it as something over 3. And the reason for that is between 3 and positive 1, 3 is going to be my common denominator. So 1 times what gives me 3? Good. Okay, and so because I multiply the 1 times 3, what do I have to multiply the 3 times?
3.
Good. And what is that?
9.
Good. Okay. Then I have negative 4/3 plus 9 over 3. And that gives me positive 5/3. Feel better about that? Good. See if I can. Okay. So, can I move off this screen? Okay. So this one is going to be something similar to number 5 on your quiz. Okay. So what is happening in this scenario is someone is being charged to move something over a certain amount of miles. Okay. So what we have is the final cost. So if you are transporting something 300 miles, okay, the cost to you is $40. Okay, so this is a 50-pound gift, and you're transporting it 300 miles. Okay, if you are transporting that same weight 1,000 miles, the cost to you is $180. Okay? So what we want to know, we want to do 2 things. The first thing that we want to do is we want to turn this into a function. We want to find an equation that goes with this data. So we are going to do this exactly the same way that we did this. Okay? We're just using data points that are about shipping. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to do. So we're going to find slope, and then we are going to we're going to plug that into y equals mx plus b, or I'm sorry, plug that into point slope form. And then we're going to simplify to y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we're going to do that first. We're going to do those three things first. Now, when you are doing a word problem, a lot of times you don't know what the x value is and what the y value is, okay? So I try to define that for you as clearly as I can, either give you ordered pairs or I tell you what to do for the x value and what to do for the y value. This is going to be our x value here, and this is going to be our y value. So what we have to do is we've got to turn that into ordered pairs. So my first ordered pair is going to be 300, 40. That means if I travel 300 miles, or if this package travels 300 miles, that then we are going to have to pay $40. If that same weighted package travels 1,000 miles, so that's my second ordered pair, then we have to pay $180. Okay? So we're going to find the slope. Change in y over change in x. I'm going to start with this second point, because if I start with that second point, I keep everything positive and it's a little bit nicer to deal with. So I'm going to do 180 minus 40 over 1,000 minus 300. So that is 140 divided by 700. Now, I know on your tests that you're not going to have calculators. And when I wrote it today, I definitely took that into account. We did it kind of like a test question today. So your point values are much smaller than what you're dealing with here or what you dealt with your thousands of dollars that you made. I could take this down to 20 cents. If I divided 140 divided by 700, my rate of change would actually be 20 cents. And what that's telling me is how much I am charged per mile. So that's my slope or my rate of change. Okay? Is that right there? So I have found my slope. Now I'm going to plug that slope into point slope form. So I'm going to have y minus y sub 1 equals my slope times x minus x sub 1. Now, when I started my slope, I started with this lower value, or my later value, my second value, because I kept everything positive. I tend to use this point to plug in here because it's the lower value. It doesn't matter though. I want you to know that you could put either one of them in. Okay, so it really doesn't matter. So now I'm going to do y minus 40 equals my slope and x minus 300. Okay. So I'm going to distribute my 0.20. Okay, and that's like 20 cents per mile. That's what that 0.20 is telling me, that you're being charged 20 cents per mile to move this. But there's a base fee, and the y-intercept represents that base fee, and that's what we have to figure out. Okay, so I've got y minus 40 equals 0.20, or 20 cents. 20 times 300. 0.2 times 300 is 60. And that is not something that I expect you to be able to figure out without a calculator. Okay? So just know that. I try to stick to that 12 times 12. And when I mess that up, then I try to give you points back on it if I do. So now at this point, I am going to add $40 to both sides. And I get 0.20x minus 20. Okay? Now, to me, that doesn't make sense. Okay? Because this right here really should be a base fee. Like it costs you $20 to put it on the truck, okay? But it still works because you're going to get it. So basically what this is giving you is a $20 discount.
Wow.
That's what that looks like, is that however far you're taking it, you get a $20 discount. You get $20 knocked off of it, which is typically not the way life works. Now, what if I asked you to determine how much would it cost for something to travel 2,000 miles? How would you do that? If I wanted to know, like if the fourth part of this question was, what does it cost to travel 2,000 miles? What would you do?
Plug in the 2,000 miles where the x is in the slope-intercept equation.
You're exactly right. Okay, and I put $2,000. It was 2,000 miles. So I would do y equals 0.20 times 2,000 minus 20. Okay, so y would be $420, or no, $400, I'm sorry. 0.2 times 2,000 would be 400. Okay, and so that's going to be y equals $380. Now, we would have expected it to be just double the 180. Okay, that's why it's important. And if it was just a straight per mile, then it would just be double. Okay, but it's not just a straight per mile because we have this negative 20. We have this $20 off. Okay, so that's why for it to go 2,000 miles, it's going to cost $380 because you're not going to get the $20 off twice. Okay, yeah, so that's that one. Okay, you said number 10 from the quiz. Is that, I'm sorry? Or something like, absolutely. So I am going, that is chapter 5. Oh, let's do this one. I've got a couple of those that we can do. Okay, so this is like number 10 on the quiz. So I have the square root of 2t minus 4 equals t minus 2. So that's one that we're going to do. Then another one that we're going to do is the square root of x plus 6 equals x. Now, before we do too much here, what is the difference between the square root of x plus 6 equals x and the square root of 2t minus 4 equals t minus 2? What are the differences between the two? Focus on the radical sign, or that square root sign. What's going on with the radical sign here?
The negative 4 is
not all up on the square root?
Okay, so yeah, so you're on the right track. Do you see how I've got the 2t minus 4 all under the square root? That means my square root's isolated. That's what's happening here, is my square root is already isolated. Here, is my square root isolated? No. I've got to move that 6 over before I can do anything else. And that was a problem on the quiz. A lot of students didn't realize that. They wanted to push something under the radical sign, or they just wanted to square everything. Before I can do anything with this one right here, I've got to subtract 6 from both sides. So I would have the square root of x equals x minus 6. Okay? You have to have the radical, or the square root, isolated before you can square. Okay? Now, for this one, is my square root already isolated? Yes. Okay, so this one's ready to square both sides. Okay? So I'm going to square here, and I'm going to square here.
Is the second one, x plus 6, is that one considered not isolated because on the x
Okay, so the reason that this is considered not isolated is because this is the only part of your square root. Okay, so you've got to have just this part completely by itself. Okay, and this is a completely different problem. If I had it written like this, okay, then it would already be isolated. Okay, this isn't the problem that we were given. The one on the right is just a completely different problem. But that's the difference. So here, the square root is already isolated. On the left-hand side, it's not isolated. You've got to get that square root isolated first. But you are correct. The reason on this second one that we've got to move that 6 over is because it's not in the square root symbol, and that makes it not isolated yet. Okay? Good question. Good observation. Okay. So back to this. So we already had the 2t minus 4 under the square root sign isolated, so we're going to square both sides. When I square the 2t minus 4 under the square root, I'm left with just 2t minus 4. Now, here on this side, I've got to FOIL that. Okay, so I've got to do t minus 2 times t minus 2. Okay, so t times t. Okay, t times negative 2. Negative 2 times t. Negative 2 times negative 2. Okay, so don't forget to FOIL that.
So you don't FOIL 2t minus 4.
Correct. And the reason that we don't FOIL that is because it is under the square root sign. And so, so if I've got the square root of 2, okay, and I square that, that gives me the square root of 4. And what is the square root of 4? 2. Okay, so when you square something that's already underneath the radical sign, you're just removing that radical sign. Okay, that's an...
It's going to be itself.
It's going to be itself. That's exactly what it's going to be. That's a great observation. Okay? And I'm even going to write that. Do not FOIL. Do not FOIL. Okay? And now I'm just writing t squared minus 4t plus 4 over here. Okay? My next step is to bring everything over. Okay? I've got to set it equal to 0. The reason that I set it equal to 0 is because it's a quadratic. So that t squared makes it a quadratic. So I'm going to subtract 2t from both sides. And I am going to add 4 to both sides. So the reason I'm adding 4 is because I've got a negative 4. Okay, so 2t and negative 2t cancel. Negative 4 and positive 4 cancel. So then I've got 0. Okay, and that can be factored. Okay, it can be factored to t minus 4 times t minus 2. Because negative 4 times negative 2 give me positive 8. Negative 4 plus negative 2 give me negative 6.
Okay, so we can do the factor on this.
Yes, we can do the factoring on this. Okay, I set each one of those equal to 0. Okay. Oops, I put t equals 0, and that's not right. Okay. You have to check these because one of them may be an extraneous solution. So we have to check them. So I am going to check the 4 first, and then I'm going to check the 2. Okay? So I go to the original problem, and I say 2 times 4 minus 4 equals 4 minus 2. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 minus 4 is 4. So I have the square root of 4. And what is the square root of 4?
2.
Does it work?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that means 4 is an answer. Now I can have neither one of them work, I can have both of them work, or I can have one of them work. So you want to always check both of them. Don't assume that because this one worked that t equals 2 won't work, because it might. Okay, so I have 2 times 2 minus 4 equals 2 minus 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 4 is the square root of 0. The square root of 0 is okay. It's not undefined. So I get 0 equals 0. They both work, so we don't have to throw either one of them out. Okay?
Yes.
Can we do the next one? And I know we started talking about the next one. I just wanted you to see the difference between those two. So now what you're going to do is we are going to FOIL both of these. So we've already isolated our square root of x. So now we're going to square both sides. Okay, the square root of x squared leaves me with x. Then I have x minus 6 times x minus 6. I am foiling that. So I have x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. Negative 6 times x is negative 6x. Negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. Good. So I have x squared minus 12x. Okay. So x equals x squared minus 12x plus 36. Okay, this is a quadratic because it's squared. So I have to set it equal to what? Good. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. 0 equals x squared minus 13x plus 36. And this can be factored. It can be factored. Okay. So it factors to negative 9 and negative 4. Negative 9 plus negative 4 give me negative 13. Negative 9 times negative 4 gives me positive 36. So then I set each one of these equal to 0. X is 9 and x is 4. But we've got to check because it's possible one of them or both of them could be an extraneous solution. Okay, so I'm going to do the square root of 9 plus 6 equals 9. The square root of 9 is 3. What's 3 plus 6?
9.
So it works. Okay. 4. The square root of 4 plus 6. Okay. Square root of 4 is 2. What's 2 plus 6?
8.
Good. So it doesn't work. So we have to throw this one out. So this is my only answer right there. Okay, and you were specifically asking for completing the square. So I have several super nice, pretty ones that we can do for completing the square. Okay? Okay. Is it okay if I go off this page? Okay.
Yes.
So, completing the square, I've got the problem, and you can use completing the square for anything. Anything that you want, you can use completing the square for. Okay? But the most ideal situations to use completing the square is when A is 1 and B is even. That's the most ideal. If A is not 1 and B is not even, then I would use the quadratic formula. That's what I would do. Okay, so here we've got y squared.
Oh, okay, because you have to do the half.
Yes, yes. And I was actually talking about that to one of my colleagues, and he said, oh, that's a great way to introduce it. And I'm like, yeah, because if you don't, you certainly can do completing the square with the fractions anytime. And it works fine with the fractions. But at this level, I tend to say, let's use the quadratic formula if we don't have it in this situation. So this is beautiful. Y squared plus 18y minus 10. Our A value is 1, so it fits that. And our B value is 18, and so it fits that. And so this is going to be completing the square. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take that negative 10, and I'm going to move it to the other side. And when I do that, I've got to add 10 to both sides. Because I've got negative 10 here, I have to add 10 to both sides. So I've got y squared plus 18y equals 10. Okay?
Okay.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Okay, at this point, I'm going to look at this value right here. This value is 18. I'm going to take half of that. Okay, what is half of 18?
9.
Good, and then we are going to square 9. Okay, so I take half of 18. 1/2 of 18 is 9. And then I square the 9. Okay, so I get 81. Okay, and by design, this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, if you don't get a perfect square trinomial, then you've done something wrong. 9 times 9 is 81. 9 plus 9 is 18. Okay, and we can rewrite that as y plus 9 squared. Okay. My next step, I take the square root of both sides. When I take the square root of 91, what do I have to put in front of it?
Plus or minus?
Plus or minus, good. So then I'm left with y plus 9 equals plus or minus 91. Now, nothing factors into 91. 7 goes into 91, but 7's definitely not perfect. And I think it goes into it 13 times. So we're definitely not getting anything. 7 times 13 is not going to get me anywhere. So we're just going to leave that the way that it is. Then my last step is to subtract that 9 from both sides. And so my final answer is y equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 91. Do you want to see another completing the square? Or okay, let's do it again then. How do you feel about quadratic formula? Yeah, and you'll be given that formula. You feel more comfortable with that? It's a completing square. Okay. Here's one that we've got to simplify a little bit. Let's do this one. Okay. So this one is x squared minus 10x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, and we typically use this when we can't factor. Okay, we use it when we can't factor. We can use it anytime. Okay, but if we can factor, we typically do factor. But we don't, we can use completing the square anytime. Again, my a value is 1, so I've got a 1 in front of that x squared. This is even. Okay, it's negative, but it's still even. Okay, that's what makes this more comfortable, is because of those two things. So I'm going to start with x squared minus 10x, and I've got to move that 1 over. So how do I move that 1 over?
Add 10 to the other side.
Subtract 1?
I'm subtracting 1. All I'm dealing with right now is that 1.
Oh, you didn't say 10.
Did I? I may have said 10. I'm sorry. I apologize. My fault. Okay. X squared minus 10x plus 1. I've got to get the number that doesn't have an x with it to the other side.
Okay.
That's the number that moves to the other side. Whatever does not have a variable with it. So I have to subtract that from both sides. And so that's how that minus 1 gets over there. Okay? Are you with me right there? Okay. Then I've got negative 10x. So I need half of negative 10. What is half of negative 10?
5?
Negative 5. Okay, don't forget your negative. Okay? Don't forget your negative. Okay, so then I'm going to square negative 5. So negative 5 squared is what?
25.
Good. So it's going to be positive 25. And that's what I add to both sides to keep it balanced. Okay. So I have x squared minus 10x plus 25. That's what I'm going to factor. And by design, it factors nicely. If it doesn't factor nicely, then we messed up. Okay? This factors to x minus 5 times x minus 5. Because negative 5 plus negative 5 gives me negative 10. Negative 5 times negative 5 gives me 25.
So is completing the square getting to a point where it can be factored?
Yes, but it has to factor to a perfect square. Like it has to be a perfect square trinomial. When you're completing the square, by design, you're creating a perfect square trinomial. And this is your perfect square trinomial. Now, some students are able to go from x squared minus 10x plus 25 straight to here. Some students can. Okay, I usually write this out just because of how we focused on factoring. But you are creating a problem where you're going to get two binomials that are exactly alike. Okay, and that's what you're doing with completing the square. It's a good question.
Oh.
Nope, you're good. Okay. So I have x minus 5 squared equals 24. My next step at this point is to take the square root from both sides. And when I do that, what do I have to do on the right-hand side? I do take the square root, and in front of that square root, what do I have to write? Good. Very good. Plus or minus. So then I have x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 24. Okay? Now, the square root of 24 has a perfect square factor in it. What perfect square factor is in it?
4?
It is 4. Okay, so I'm going to break this up into 4 times 6. Okay, there's no reason to break 24 up into 8 times 3. Okay, there's no reason to do that. because 8 or 3, neither one of them are perfect. You've got to break it up into something that's perfect. Okay, and then I'm going up here. So I have x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 4 times 6. Okay, the square root of 4 is 2. And what's my last step? Okay, my last step then is to just add 5 to both sides. Okay, there's one more that I want to do. And we can actually, I think we can solve this one by completing the square too if we want to. Okay, can I move off of this? Now this is on your practice test, but I also want you to look at it right now. So I've got 3 over x plus 2 over x plus 3 equals 1. Okay, so we have to solve this. This is a rational equation. This is a rational equation. My son is texting me. That's who is texting me, so sorry about that. So the way that we solve a rational equation is we multiply everything by its LCD. Okay, it's LCD. So the first LCD I've got to look at is this x. Okay. Then I've got to look at this x plus 3. X and x plus 3 are different, okay? They're different because that x plus 3 is a unit. It's got to stay together. So x, it's like when we're factoring or we're multiplying. It's not the same thing. Then my denominator here is just 1, so I don't have to include anything else there. So my first step in solving this is identifying the LCD, and once I've identified the LCD, I multiply everything times the LCD, okay? And this is x times x plus 3 over 1. So I have x times x plus 3 over 1. And then I am multiplying this times each individual term. So then I have 3 over x. Okay, now I've got x times x plus 3 okay, and that's my original problem is 2 over x plus 3. And then the last part is times the 1. So I have x times x plus 3. Okay. Now, if it's in the top and it's in the bottom, I can cancel it out. So I've got an x here and I've got an x here, so I can cancel both of those out. So I'm left with 3x plus 3. Okay. Here I've got x plus 3 and x plus 3. Here I'm left with 2x. Okay. Then I have x times x plus 3 because I'm multiplying that by 1 and nothing cancels out. At this point, we have an equation that we can solve. You might be able to identify it's a quadratic because you've got your x times your x plus 3, but you might not, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute. Ultimately, we're going to be setting this equal to 0. So I have 3 times x and 3 times 3, so that's 3x plus 9. Then I'm keeping my 2x, and here I've got x squared plus 3x. And because of that x squared, we know it's a quadratic, and we're going to have to set it equal to 0. Okay? 3x and 2x is 5x. Okay? I subtract 5x from both sides. I'm left with 9 equals x squared plus 3x. I should have subtracted 9 at the same time, and I didn't. Okay, so I'm going right here. So I have 0 equals x squared. I did make a mistake. Does anybody see my mistake?
We're supposed to try 9 at the same time as the family.
You don't have to, but you can. I made a mistake with addition. Does anybody see it?
Oh, negative 2x.
Uh-huh. Do you see what I did right there? 3x minus 5x, and I wrote 3x down. So that's wrong. So I need to put plus or minus 2x is what should be right there, is minus 2x. So we all make mistakes, don't we? It happens. Okay. And now we're going to be able to do completing the square one more time. I know that makes everybody very happy. Okay. That cannot be factored. Okay. So we have to do completing the square, or we have to do quadratic formula. Okay. I'm actually going to go to the next screen. Has everybody got written down what they need written down? Okay. So it is x squared minus 2x minus 9, right?
Yes, it is.
Good, okay. Tell me what I move over and why. You want to try? Tell me what to move over.
The 9.
Good.
Negative 9.
Okay, so how do I move negative 9 to the other side? What do I have to do?
You add 9.
Perfect. You got it. Excellent job. Okay. Then, Caitlin, what do I do?
You take half of negative 2, which is negative 1, and
Good.
then you square it.
Excellent. Excellent. And so then I'm going to put plus 1 on both sides. Okay. Sarah, do you know what I do next?
Let's see.
I guess I'm doing green. Okay. What do I do the 9 plus 1?
I see add.
Yeah. What's
10.
You got it. Good job. Okay. Now we're going to factor x squared minus 2x plus 1. Okay. And that factors to x minus 1 times x minus 1. Okay. That's the same thing as x minus 1 squared. Okay. Sarah, you want to try the next step? Do you know what we do next? We're going to undo the squared. So what operation undoes the squared?
Let's see. Dividing.
Okay. We're actually going to do square root. Oh, yeah. So your square root. And I'm going to put plus or minus in front of that 10. So I have x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 10. And then I'm pretty much done. 10 cannot be simplified any further. So it's going to stay just like that. Okay? Now you guys are all in my Monday, Wednesday class, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I've got more review sessions. My sweet son. I've got more review sessions tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. That's on the first floor. Okay, that's on the first floor in room 120. That's when my Tuesday, Thursday class is. So I'm in there at 8:30. Then tomorrow at 2, and I'm pretty sure we're back here in this room tomorrow at 2. I don't know if you guys are on campus tomorrow or not. So this is Tuesday. Then we've got one more on Wednesday right before our class. So it's at 8 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Okay, you don't have to come.
Yeah.
But that is in our room, and that's right before our test. Okay? And all these are online. So if you have any trouble, you're not sure where to look on Canvas. Canvas has a ton of information on there. Okay? Okay, I am headed